Shane Foster, your product specialist manager with Team Wendy here at the Parma Armory in Parma, Ohio. Today, we're going to take you on a little adventure, if you will. We're going to walk you through what is a rifle-rated helmet. We're going to talk about our RIFLETECH helmet, which is now setting the standard in the market. So we hope you sit back, enjoy, take some information in, and this will help you to make an educated decision on what type of helmet you need to put on your head to make sure that you have the best opportunity to go home at the end of the night. So rifle rated, what does that mean? Well, we need to first of all understand what is the limitations of a helmet. We need to understand what the expectations are. Is a helmet bulletproof? We hear these things all the time out there. So what we want to talk about today is really the maximum life-saving potential of a helmet. Well, if you watched any videos that we produced, we've talked about this in depth, but ultimately what that means is simply what is the capabilities that helmet can stop a projectile at said speed. Well, in order for us to understand that, we got to understand weight, performance, and price, because these three things need to come together whenever we make an educated decision on what helmet to buy to protect our men and women of law enforcement and the military communities. Before we get going into this, we want to make sure we establish rules of engagement. We don't want you to think that there's any sleight of hand. We don't want to try to pull the wool over your eyes. We want to show you exactly what we mean. And so by doing that, the first thing we're going to establish is the fact that when we get into the shooting portion, you're going to find that the video is uncut. There's not going to be any type of us taking one helmet and putting a new helmet in. We're going to shoot the helmet, walk up to the helmet, look at the helmet so that you can make the decision that you need based off of factual information. The next thing is we're going to talk about the type of caliber. We're going to tell you why we shoot it in certain areas. We're going to establish all these perimeters out there. The next thing we want to do is we're going to talk about backface deformation a little bit. We're going to talk about V50 a little bit. We're going to talk about comfort, because when it's all said and done, we want to make sure that you're selecting a helmet that is not just the highest protection helmet out there, but we also want you to feel confident about why you're wearing that particular helmet. So generally, when we look at a helmet, we want to look at three aspects. Price, because price matters, let's face it. The next thing is we look at performance. We're going to cover performance in detail in just a few moments. But there's one that I want to tackle right now, and that is weight. Why weight matters. Now, some will say, well, it doesn't matter because law enforcement is not on an operation more than an hour and military can take it off. And there's all these different what ifs. But the fact is it does matter. It matters in how you perform and how you do your job. If you're wearing 7-8 pounds, once you put all the accessories on that helmet, that begins to create wear and tear on the operator, if you will. And so when we look at weight, we have to compare it in apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And what I mean by that is if I take a 4-pound helmet and I compare it to a 2-pound helmet, that's not the same, not in the same weight class, if you will. So there are competitors out there that have weight classes of 2.7, 2.9, 3.1, all the way up to 5 pounds. But then when you stop and you look at what the RIFLETECH brings to the table, and that is a 2.47 pound shell and a 3.2 to 3.4 pound total system weight, and you start comparing the helmets and the competitors, that's where we start separating the wheat from the chaff. That's where we start separating the truth from words. Because with the RIFLETECH, you're going to get a V50 of up to 4,400 plus feet per second. You're looking at one of the lightest systems in the entire country when it comes to performance. And that in and of itself is why the RIFLETECH is a standout helmet that you should consider looking at when making your next purchase. So one of the most important things that you can understand when it comes to making an educated decision is understanding the maximum life-saving potential of the helmet. So what does that actually mean? Well, you've probably heard out there about the backface deformation test. You've probably heard about RTP, which is resistance to penetration. You've heard about NIJ. You've heard about all these other standards, but there's one that we have to pay special attention to, and that is a V50 test. Now, I know you say, well, it has to do with bomb fragmentation. It does, but it also has to do with the maximum life-saving potential of a helmet. Let me explain. So a 9mm round, as it strikes an object, most of us understand that it expands, it mushrooms, it blossoms. So therefore it creates drag, if you will. So it doesn't really test the absolute limitations of the material. The reason that we hold that the V50 is so important is because we are taking a 17 grain projectile, a 64 grain, a 2 grain 4, and multiple others that does not expand, that does not blossom, if you will. And so it holds itself together, creating absolute penetration into that material. So the higher the V50, the higher the probability of survival. Now you say, how does that relate to rifle rated? I'm glad you asked that question. So let me answer that for you. So whenever we look at a helmet and they say it's rifle rated, we have to determine, is that at muzzle velocity or is that extended range? A good example is a 5.56 223, so AR-15s, one of the most, if not the most prevalent rifle in the United States of America. The muzzle velocity of a 5.56 is approximately 3,000 feet per second, depending on the round. So a lot of these helmets out there will say, well, it's an extended range and our actual V50 may be 24, 26, 2,800 feet per second. Well, that just doesn't cut it here at Team Wendy, because we understand that in real life, sometimes I have to go through that door. Sometimes I may be engaged in a confrontation in a battle where it's 10 yards, 15, 25. I don't have the luxury, if you will, to go out 300, 400, 500 yards away where now I'm safe. So at muzzle velocity of 3,000 at 500 yards, now my velocity is roughly 1,500 feet per second. So basically what they're saying is, you get in a gunfight, you got to say, time out, let me run back to a safe area so that I can survive this encounter. That's not what we think at Team Wendy. We know that you may have to survive that encounter at 5 yards, 10 yards, whatever the case is. So that's why the V50 is so important, because the higher the V50, the higher your probability of you going home. And that's really what our mission is all about. So I'm not going to tell you my age, but I grew up in an era where there was a cool movie that started with back and ended with future. And in that movie, there was this neat little thing called the flux capacitor. And so I use that analogy whenever we're talking about helmets, weight, performance, and price. And one of the most important aspects is area density. You say, why are we getting into all this big terminology? I just want to know about buying a helmet. Well, area density simply means how much material do we have that protects this thing on top of my shoulders, being my head. So we want to look at weight, but we also have to look at how much area density do we actually have. Well, we're pleased to announce that we can offer up to 161 square inches of area density on our RIFLETECH helmet, but also at the weight of 2.47 pounds. That is truly what begins to separate. So when we make decisions, we also have to say, hey, here's the area that it's covering, but here's the weight that it is. And when those two things become the lowest or best in class, that is a winner, and that's exactly what the RIFLETECH offers. All right, so now we want to talk about the features and benefits of the RIFLETECH helmet, starting with the shroud at the front right here. So if you're wondering, will this fit my night vision mount? The answer is yes. Done in-house, proprietary, it is absolutely done to spec to make sure that you get the tightest fit of your night vision mount that you can. We also listen to the customer. There was some concerns and questions about the type of connections we have for our shock cord to prevent your night vision from moving around. So we listened to you and we came in there and we added the hooks on the end. Along with that, one of the things that I'm most proud of is we didn't cut cost at putting some cheap rubber trim that's going to eventually fall off and not create rigidity that you should have on your helmet. So this is all ejection molded edge trim. Along with that, we had several end users that are operational today that helped us with the design of the Velcro pattern. So from the front to mounting any type of cable management, to the sides, which actually is channelized to allow your cables to run up and through, to making sure you have plenty of room up top for IR or any other attachments, and all the way to the back to make sure that you have enough for a battery pack, a counterweight, and or some type of placard or ID system. Along with that, we also have the reverse dovetails. So the question came, why did you go away from the 3.0? Well, we understood that the reverse dovetail is probably the most widely accepted rail system in the industry. So because of that, we listened to the consumers, but we didn't just throw a rail system. We made it low profile. We made it reinforced polycarbonate, so it's not going to shatter. It's not going to frag. God forbid something ever happened to that. So when we look at this helmet, everything was thought out, from the shroud to the Velcro to the rails, and even the paint has made sure that it's of high quality so that you have a product that's going to last for years. So one of the things that makes Team Wendy unique and really gives us capabilities that quite honestly outperform a lot of competitors is the merger between Avon Protection, Ceradyne, and Team Wendy. Historically, we know that Team Wendy has always set the standard when it comes to comfort, but Ceradyne has set the standard, shattered the standard when it comes to ballistic performance and protection. And one of the ways they did that is through a no thru-hole design. Now, there's a lot of competitors. There's now a lot of knockoffs out there. But what does that actually mean, no thru-hole? Well, we understand the importance of making sure that we're not drilling at the very front of my helmet. If I have to enter into a structure, left, right, whatever, typically the front of my helmet is exposed to the most dangerous part of that unknown environment. So I don't want this to be weaker. I want to make sure it has an absolute structural integrity from front to back to left to right. And so I'm happy to say our RIFLETECH has adopted, just like that of the Epic, no thru-hole designs, where we make sure that you have uncompromised material throughout every part of this helmet. So just like previous versions of Team Wendy, we have the Zorbium liner inside, which is really a multi-layered liner. And the design of that is, the harder the impact that you succumb to, the greater the protection that you have. Basically, our liners fight layer by layer and line upon line, if you will, to keep you safe. But we didn't stop there. We wanted to make sure that we kept your heads as cool as we possibly can. So we added the new cooling pad, if you will, inside. And one of the awesome features is how the pad basically breaks down. So every time you're taking a step, this thing is not just compressing, it's twisting, which aids in that constant airflow inside of your helmet, which also works in conjunction with our channelized vents right here. So to put this thing with a pretty bow on top of it, you've got comfort liners or comfort pads. You've got the internal liner that's really multi-layered, and then you have the cooling pads that all work in conjunction to keep you safe, but also to keep you comfortable so that you can do your job at the best of your ability. So put this in one big package. Here's what we offer at Team Wendy. Not only one of the highest performances in shells in the industry, but all the great other features, but it doesn't stop there. It works in layers all the way to the inside. So here's how I try to explain it. If you're going home at the end of the day, God forbid this happens, but you get into an automobile accident, there's three main features that's going to keep you safe. One is going to be the frame of the car. We have one of the highest protective frames in the industry. The next is going to be a seat belt, which is your retention, all made in-house at the Cleveland facility so that we can inspect good quality control. We don't cheap out on any kind of fibers, any type of materials. Everything is made of the utmost quality. And finally, you have an airbag. Those three features, from your shell to your seatbelt to your airbag inside, is what keeps you safe. And the same is true with the RIFLETECH. It just does it far beyond what a lot of the competitors out there have to offer. So now we've talked about all the great features and benefits of the RIFLETECH helmet. We've talked about the inside, the outside, the incredibly high V50 at 4,400 plus feet per second, 2.47 pound shell, and numerous other things. And we're going to get into the meat of the matter, which is shooting this helmet in a live stream, if you will, so that you can see uncut footage. And here to help me today is Sean, who's going to be helping behind the scenes, a part of the category management / product specialist team, and Dustin, who is our illustrious shooter, who's not going to miss at all. Yeah, okay. So we're going to have a great time. I hope you guys enjoy this. Sit back and check it out. All right, before we go live here and Dustin starts pulling the trigger, we're going to walk you through the weapon systems. The front, we're going to start with a 9mm. Off to the left-hand side, we're going to go into a 40 caliber. Right-hand side, a 10mm. The back of the helmet, a 5.56, and finally finish it off with a 308 at the top of the helmet. So the first round that we're going to fire on the helmet is going to be a 115 grain 9mm round by Blazer Ammunition. That's running somewhere around 1,100 feet per second plus. We're going to be shooting it at the front of the helmet. Dustin will take the shot. We're going to leave the cameras rolling. Come down here, check it out so you can see what happens for yourself.
Going hot, going hot. Entry. Very minimal back face deformation, complete stoppage, round is still at the top of the helmet, slight glance.
So now we're going to be shooting the left side or right side, depending on the orientation of the helmet, with a Cellar and Bellet 40 caliber round that is roughly about 980 feet per second. This is a 180 grain caliber round.
Going hot, going hot. On you, Dustin, take your time, bro. Show you entry. Looks like we have a little bit of exit. Looks like Dustin's going to be buying lunch. Again, very minimal back face deformation, no penetration. So our bellicity or obliquity is basically the angle in which the round strikes the helmet. We have a 0 obliquity to a 10, 12, 15. Where I couldn't do this without instrumentation, we know this is not a flat shot, so therefore we're going to continue to shoot it, but this is the reality of what happens in combat situations. Not every round strikes it perfectly flat. Some can be 5 degrees, some can be 30 degrees. But ultimately what matters is what is the back face deformation and did it stop the round? And in this case, absolutely.
So we hear all the time, hey man, you shot it with a 9, you shoot it with a 357, but now a lot of law enforcement agencies have moved to a 10mm. So again, we listen and we've responded. So now we're going to shoot the opposite side of the helmet. Cellar Bellet, this is a 10mm round burning around 1185. That's a fast round at 180 grains. So we're going to shoot on the right-hand side and hopefully we get some good data to show you exactly what the capabilities are.
Going hot, going hot. Downrange. Entry, dead on. Again, this is just the way that the construction of the helmet works. The curvature, which is a good thing. This is all the round, which is right there, but did it penetrate? So we turn this over, and again, very minimal back face deformation inside, as you can see, 0 penetration. And that is what a helmet should do.
So 9mm, stop. 40 caliber, stop. 10mm, stop. But now let's step up into the big leagues. Not at 200 yards, not at 300, not at 500. So a lot of the rifle rated quote unquote helmets out there will say we're rifle rated as long as you're at 2, 3, 4, 500 yards away. We're not doing that. Dustin's shooting about 20, 25 yards back there. We're going to be shooting first and foremost with a 5.56 round, 55 grain or M193. Muzzle velocity, according to what's on the box, is 3,180 feet per second. This thing is cruising. We're going to send it right to the back of the helmet and see what happens.
When you're ready. Give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Eyes, ears, eyes, ears, eyes, ears. Going hot, going hot, going hot. Dustin, on you, you have control. Downrange.
Range is cool.
That's a stop.
All right, so 5.56. Not many people are brave enough to show you what happens, but we are. We want to show you uncut footage, but I want to explain a couple things. Not only did we already shoot it in the front, the left, the right, now we've shot it with a high velocity round in the back. Now, the first concern that most of you would have is, did it stop the round? Without question, it stopped the round. These pads are designed to expand, which is where you see this a little bit, but there is no hole here, and there's no hole on our Noxie head form, which lets us know this thing without a doubt stopped the round. The next question is backface deformation. You say, well, man, that's got backface deformation. It absolutely does. And if backface deformation was actually killing men and women out there, we would be concerned. But there is no historical documentation nor evidence that backface deformation in the last 30 years has killed anybody. The biggest concern is stopping the round. Now, do I want to get shot with a 5.56 in the back of the helmet? Nope. But if I have to, I want to have that helmet that has the highest V50 and highest maximum life-saving potential. And that's exactly what this helmet offers. All right, so 9mm, 40 caliber, 10mm, 5.56. Now we're going to be shooting it with a 308. This is a Federal ammunition. It's a 150 grain cartridge, full metal jacket. Approximate speed on this one right here is around 2885 or 2900 feet per second per se. That's a lot of foot-pounds of force. We're going to drive directly into the top of the helmet and then show you exactly what happens.
Dustin, good. Andrew, good. Good, good. Sean's good. Going hot, going hot, going hot. Dustin, you have the time and control. Downrange. So there's the round. As you guys can see, that's a complete stop. 308, burning almost 3,000 feet per second.
So now you've seen the performance of the RIFLETECH. Let's talk about some of the results, if you will. So we look inside the RIFLETECH, and the first thing that always comes up is, what about backface deformation? So let me reiterate what I said. There's not any historical evidence in the last 30 years of anyone dying from backface deformation that we're aware of. So that is certainly, as we say, the molehill, not the mountain. However, we do know that multiple have been killed because of penetration. So stopping the round is the most important thing. So with that, did we stop it with a 9? Yes. 40? Yes. 10 mil? Yes. 5.56 and 308? The answer is yes. And that is the absolute most important thing, is stopping the round. The next thing I like to point out is If you remember NASCAR and some of the Formula One racers way back in the day, often would die or have debilitating injuries throughout their entire career because they would hit the wall. And the reason for that is the cars were very rigid. Well, we have designed these helmets intentionally to work like a crumple point, if you will. We want them to give some of the energy up and not hold their shape and crumple in, because what that does is that disperses the energy within the shell instead of into your head. So when we look at back face deformation, we're not saying it doesn't matter. We're just looking at it through the lens of logic. And is it the mountain or is it the molehill? And the fact is, it's the molehill. And just for redundancy, let me explain when we say rifle rated. A lot of competitors out there will say, well, we're rifle rated for 2,800. Well, rifle rated for this. Well, yeah, but that's if the rifle is shooting at 300, 400, 500 meters away. Well, just like we talked about earlier, muzzle velocity with a 5.56 is around 3,000 feet per second. At 500 meters is at 1,500 feet per second. You don't have the luxury to say, time out, bad guy. Let me go back 300 meters before you shoot me. You have to be able to stop the round at muzzle velocity all the way out to 300, 400, 500 or whatever the case is. The next thing I want to talk about very quickly is penetration. So you can look, and I could see you probably say, well, we can't 100% understand if there's a hole or not. Well, I assure you there is no hole. But if that's not enough confidence inside of you, we don't use clay. Why? Because there is no skull in clay. We don't use soap. Why? Because it's not a true representation of how the human head performs when it's wearing a helmet and the helmet is struck by a ballistic round. We use a Noxie head form, which is the truest form to true fashionable, the way that your skull would actually form or deform, if you will. And we can always tell whether or not it was a successful shot or not, because we can look over here and we can see zero penetration, but even more so, we can push on the skull. And if this thing would have pushed in and fractured the skull, we would feel a soft spot, and not one soft spot all the way around the helmet. So we don't just test it using smoke and mirrors. We're not in the business of running after shiny coins and just saying, well, here's a marketing pitch. Our goal is to make sure that we put the absolute best performance on your head, because that is the mission of Team Wendy. So in finality, we want to say thank you to our men and women of the law enforcement, first responder community, also to all branches of service in the armed forces. We appreciate everything that you do for our country, and it is not taken for granted. And finally, here at Team Wendy, make sure that when you're making the decision to purchase a helmet, a life-saving piece of equipment, that you look through the lens of logic, which is weight, performance, and price, and that they make sense in your world. And we always say here when we do these kind of videos is thank you for being a part of our team.